Welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours, everyone. Thanks so much for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community, mentorship, and learning. I'm your host, Dave Nava. I'm a lead solution engineer at Salesforce and a military trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host or sometimes co-host to take part in the conversation so we can leverage their experience, their expertise, and their unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is LinkedIn personal branding. So, if you've ever wondered how best to leverage LinkedIn to communicate your value to prospective employers, or even your current one, this is the session for you. I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host for tonight's session, Chelyn. Chelyn is a senior Salesforce partnership manager at Lorien. She's also a certified public speaker, a coach, and a women in tech champion at Supermums, which is an organization that provides women with Salesforce training, work experience, and job placement. It is great to have you co-hosting Office Hours with me, Chelyn. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. Do you want to take a moment and further introduce yourself and share your Salesforce story?
Sure, absolutely. I really started my Salesforce journey as a customer, or really a prospect at the time. I was in sales leadership and had a sales team of 9 people. We were doing things in kind of an old school way, so I got involved with evaluating different companies to work with, and we decided to move forward with Salesforce implementation. And it was honestly a beast, and it did not go well. And my experience was that we sort of took everything we were doing offline and lots of Excel spreadsheets and things and just created it on Salesforce without much discussion around what was possible and what other best in class companies were doing. So it was a bit of a disappointment. And then I was involved in 2 other experiences again in sales leadership and really advocated for getting Salesforce into those organizations. And again, not well done, kind of on the fly, trying to piecemeal it together. And I was really inspired by Dreamforce and the customer stories, and just thought, I have got to figure out what's actually possible. So I saved money, I quit my job, and just took time to do a web development boot camp and to study Salesforce and get Salesforce certified. At the time, I had planned to move into Salesforce consulting, and my timing was really challenging because the pandemic hit, and I have at the time 8-year-old twins in school who are now being homeschooled. So I ended up working for Supermums because they were in the UK and I could work while my kids were asleep and then help them with school during the day. And I was really attracted to that idea of working with people that were, and in this case, they were mostly mothers who were looking to move into Salesforce and find well-paid, flexible work. So I sort of accidentally found my way into the recruiting and talent side of the business, and I just love it, and was recruited to Lorien, and that's my focus. So I just love that piece of it. I found that LinkedIn branding was incredibly powerful for my own journey. I made a complete wholesale change in career. I only knew one person who was in Salesforce. And so I had to start from zero. And LinkedIn personal branding really transformed my career. And then working with others through Supermums and now with Lorien to see what they're able to accomplish with personal branding, and LinkedIn in particular in this case has been really inspiring and something I enjoy.
That's a great story. And I had a similar story where LinkedIn branding really helped me break into the ecosystem and led to a lot of open doors and opportunities. So I'm excited for this session to dig into that and kind of how you did that. And then for those that aren't familiar with Supermums, phenomenal organization that helps not only single moms or moms that are raising children, but also dads too, and helps them get back into the workforce through training and through job placement. I volunteered as an admin mentor, and it was a really rewarding experience. So they're always looking for volunteers. You can find them on the web if you want to volunteer.
Yes. So yeah. And I would add one other thing is I am a huge ally for military community. I named my son after the 3 men in my family, all Roberts, who served, and really proud to do that, and family in Pensacola, Florida. So military life and commitment and honor has been a part of my life throughout it. So I'm especially pleased to help in any way that I can.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I really thank you for your support of the Military Trailblazer Office Hours community, which is not just Military Trailblazers, also allies. Everyone's welcome to join. But yeah, it's your support, not just tonight, but throughout, because you're always, sharing our posts and advocating for us has been phenomenal. We appreciate it. All right. For those that may be joining for the first time, I always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours, kind of before we open the floor for questions and discussion. So these sessions are intended to be an informal get-together for gathering with, like I mentioned, both military trailblazers and allies, everyone, to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding-related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career-related goals. So for this next hour, this is your opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help ask and answer questions from your perspective, which of course provides additional diversity of experience to the answers that are given. So please keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. In a moment here, I'll start posting in chat, and I'll be sharing links to connect with Chelyn. I'll be sharing links to knowledge articles and informative posts that have been pushed onto LinkedIn and Twitter throughout the week. Great place to click and learn in addition to what we're talking about tonight. If you want to ask a question at any point during today's session, please feel free to do so. This is your session. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up, no worries. You can post it in chat. And I'll do my best to both monitor the hands raised in the Google Meet app, as well as looking for questions in chat. And then finally, tonight's session is being recorded. So if you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, maybe you're asking about alternative work options and you don't want your boss to know, that's totally fine. Just let me know before speaking and I'll make sure it's edited out of the final recording. Before we do open the floor for questions, I want to turn it over to Chelyn because she has a presentation to kind of set the context and talk about her journey a bit more. So Chelyn, over to you.
Yes, perfect. And I do have some slides to facilitate discussion, but please do speak up, ask questions, contribute as we go. So no need to wait on that. All right. Can everyone see these slides?
Yeah, we've got you.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I've already been introduced, but I did want to point out a couple of things, and that is that I do have sessions on Thursdays, Lorien Live, kind of an alignment with what we're talking about today. So feel free to hop in. Those are LinkedIn Lives. And then I also have a newsletter, again, related career Salesforce space that goes out on Tuesdays. So feel free to sign up for either of those. And then I want to make sure that from a LinkedIn branding perspective, that branding is really for everyone. And you have a brand, whether or not you realize it. And I think that's something that's always really important to know. So if you're not intentional with it, you do have one. And the work that I do at Lorien, I'm not a recruiter myself, but I work with teams of recruiters, and we have a Salesforce specific team. And every day we meet and talk about jobs that we're filling and candidates. And it has been fascinating to find out from a recruiter's perspective and the client's perspective, the things that they say. And so many times there's obviously the skill sets, and that's, critical, but so much of it comes back to branding. So I want to mention that the branding is what you want to be known for, and that should be very deliberate. And I always like to suggest that you consider if 100 people that were kind of the ideal people for you were to look at your profile and then leave the profile and go into a meeting where there's opportunities being discussed, what is it that you would want them to say about you? What would you want them to really take from that time that they spent on your profile and be able to remember that themselves and then share that information? The other piece is going to be a lot of values. What are the things that you care about? What are your interests? What are the focus areas for yourself and for those, around you? And I would say it's really important to be able to have, 3 to 5, but starting with three words that would really describe you well, that you would want to be remembered for. And that can take a variety of things. But if you were to say, if I left reading your profile and I went into a room to talk about who I recommended that we hire, what are the 3 things that you would want me to say? So those would be from a branding perspective. Does anyone have any questions around that or experience of what may have happened in your own life as you've approached, branding, or perhaps that it didn't work well, that you've had, you're getting feedback or you're not getting traction and realize that perhaps you're not showing up in a way that you might like? Okay, so that would be an area that, and especially with sort of military life, right? And some of that history or any kind of career transition. But I think for many of you, there's something unique in that you've had this time of service, or your family, you've relocated, there's a lot of those things that well. Sometimes it's hard to figure out, how do I move that forward into this new Salesforce world? How can that be relevant? And I would say taking some time to really think about what were the gifts in your experience? What were the things that, and these, what comes to mind, right, is that discipline, that organization, the leadership, the efficiencies. There's so many things that you can take from the experiences, and each of you will have something unique. But those kinds of values, interest, and that personality, your resume's a little harder because it is black and white. It's going to be very, static, but your LinkedIn profile, I always love to think of it in terms of more of a living cover letter. One of the things that I see people really struggle with is when they're thinking, I need to show up on LinkedIn, they want to produce content. There's a lot of conversation about it. There hasn't often been a lot of thought about, why are you there? And why are you there right in this season? And this is going to change. So if you are there to get a job, the advice that I would give you would be different. If you are there to build community, so for instance, when I shifted careers, I needed to cultivate a Salesforce community. And during that season, it was way more important that I was able to connect with people than recruiters or hiring managers needed to know who I was or why they should be interested. And the approach that I took in that situation, and it's worked well for others, is I got involved in the nonprofit sides or with Supermums, and it created this sort of softer profile that when I was reaching out to people, it wasn't seeming like I'm trying to connect with you because I want something. It was more, that connection, being part of the community. If you're somebody that has a job and you have responsibilities, it's, what are you trying, who needs to know who you are? If you're somebody that's customer facing, right? It's most important with LinkedIn that your customers view you as credible and accessible and interesting and trusted. If you're looking to move up in your career, and this is at your current company or at another company, it's really important that your LinkedIn profile doesn't look backwards. So what most people do is, over time, they build up their profile and their brand, and what made them successful in their past jobs, it's usually irrelevant in many ways for their next job. So if you're thinking in terms of your next opportunity, what are the qualities, traits, experiences, skills that hiring manager, recruiter is going to be most interested in, or your boss or your leaders at your company? And go back through and make sure that the brand that shows up, the examples that you use, and I'll show you some more of those, that they're relevant to what's next. And so for me, it is just an example. My whole career has been in sales and lots of sales achievements and goals and beating the numbers by X%. Well, that wasn't going to be as relevant. So I needed to figure out, how do I bring Salesforce into that experience? Although it was honestly kind of a sliver of my professional life, but you have to kind of work those things. And I'll show you why that's important in a moment. So why are you there? What are you trying to accomplish? And then, what do you want? What do you want out of LinkedIn? And I think most people that I talk to, they are stumped when I ask them that question because they're not really sure. So if you want a new job, you want a promotion, you want friends, you want visibility, you want new opportunity, you want to change careers, whatever it is that you want is important. And that changes for everybody. But if you can say, why am I there? What do you want? And then what's next? And again, always keeping this, you want clarity, you want to be current and relevant to where you are now, but framing things and really building out for what is next. And that brand for what is next, what's going to be valuable for the future, is going to be really important. Okay. And then, so from a branding perspective, I'm bringing this up for a couple of reasons. There's so much about your brand is unspoken, right? So it's going to be kind of what it looks like, what it sounds like, the words you use, the people you relate to, the comments you make. I think many times people think in terms of branding, it's how does your profile look? And so much of your brand is way beyond anything that you would be putting in visible. So when I want to really check somebody out and I want to get to know who they are, I immediately go to their activity section on their profile. And I go look back, a couple years even, and I want to see what are the comments they're making, what kind of posts they make. Yes, but when we're posting our own things, most people understand you're being very deliberate about that typically, but most people are less careful about the comments that they make. And so I always want to see somebody who is like really quick with praise and celebrating people's successes, that if there's a controversial topic that they're respectful, that somebody that looks like I would want to interact with and work with, that I might want to report to me or I might want to work for. And my current boss, I only knew him on LinkedIn, and I was able to get an incredible amount of information about him as a leader, as a boss, as a mentor, as a contributor in the world. And that really impacted me because that's the first time that had ever happened where I didn't know somebody in real life, so to speak. But I wanted you to see this branding piece here, because one of the things that's the easiest thing to do is the photo that you choose. This shows up everywhere, every comment, every endorsement, everywhere on LinkedIn that you go. This image is what gets placed all over. And if you just look, here was just like a random example. What do you notice when you look at these? Like, which ones kind of stand out to you?
I think for me, the second one down from the top stands out, because obviously this person is a speaker. People are coming to watch him, so I'm interested. I look at the picture and I go, I want to know what he's talking about. So that's the one that stood out to me. Plus the red background, I think, is eye-catching. So without actually him saying anything, I'm already interested to go visit his profile.
Yep, exactly. That's it's a great point. And so if you look at some of the others, the ones that I see a lot, so the gentleman at the top, there's a lot of clutter behind him. So it just doesn't show up as much. The third one, there's a shadow. The last one's really deliberate that way. So now I would say the second one, great color, really simple, and he's a speaker. So if you were not looking for a speaker, you were looking to hire somebody to be a team member, individual contributor, kind of heads down, you might not be looking for somebody who's going to be a dynamic speaker. And so you just have to think in terms of what you're putting out there. What does it show? And this is a great way because you can control where you comment. So I can tell you one of the ways that I built relationships at Salesforce, and this was specific to David, was a good example, is I was really impressed with the work that David was doing in the community and the topics. And so I started commenting and engaging, and David did not know me from anyone. And just over about a 6-month period of time, we built a relationship because I was trying to add value, but that's something that all of us can do. And you can do that with potential hiring managers, with recruiters, and you do it not by sending messages, you do it by engaging in what's important to that other person. So David, I don't know if you have any input on just like, if you can think back, like how you and I connected, like, did it feel like it was, I guess, manipulative in any way, or did it feel very authentic?
No, it felt authentic. And I remember there was one point where you reached out to me in a DM, and I think maybe it was a New Year's resolution, but you said you wanted to focus on a couple folks and kind of promote them through social media to help them achieve their branding goals. And I was one of the ones that you picked. And so like, it was amazing because when I was posting, you were actually creating original posts from my posts and sharing it with your network, which was incredibly kind, but also helpful to me from a branding perspective. And so, that's that, and a lot of the other things that you were doing, even though we had never met before, cemented that relationship, and obviously, led to its growth. And here you are today. So to your earlier point, anybody can do that, right? You just have to devote some time, read people's posts, and provide some insightful comments and some value, which is easy to do. It just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah, and I would say exactly. And what I did is I asked David and a few others, like, hey, I want to support a few people on the New Year's resolutions. What's important to you? And he said, I'm trying to promote my YouTube channel. I have a newer YouTube channel. And so everyone can do that. And you just have to decide who it is that you want to build connections with and find ways to add value. It didn't take a ton of time, but it was a relationship that I was interested in developing. So I share that just because I think it's a good example, and it doesn't take a lot of time, but it does take being deliberate and being consistent.
Yeah, we've got a raised hand. Joe, did you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, but you know what? Actually, the last couple of sentences, I think, answered it. My question was going to be, there's so much good material out there, and it doesn't take too much time, but you also don't want to do that for 20 million people, because then it would take too much time. So my question was going to be, how do you decide which ones you're going to be deliberate about? And, what are the questions you asked yourself? I know with you, Chelyn, you said that you wanted to support other people. So that's a great question that you asked yourself. Who do I want to support? And those are the ones that I'm going to mainly comment on. What are some of the other questions that we could each ask ourselves so we're deliberate about steering our branding to help us in our journey?
Yeah, I would say if you think about who could have a positive influence on your career and life. So one of the things, and this is one of the reasons that I wanted to get to know David, and I saw who he was and how he worked, but honestly, it was helpful to me in my job at Lorien to be connected with more people at Salesforce, particularly specialized talent. And David's happy at Salesforce, but at the end of the day, he knows a lot of people who are great candidates for us. So having a relationship that's public too, right? So people see David commenting on my stuff now. Now I had to do that for a while with him before the first time he commented, but the minute he does that, now he's endorsing me. And when candidates see, or, you know, frankly, being invited on a show is a really big deal. We have a great customer and we actually need to help them hire 20 specialized Salesforce talent, and they have a specific interest in the military. This is a really great way to do that. So I would say you want to align with somebody that has values that you respect, that it's somebody that when they take an interest in you, or people notice that you take an interest in them, that's a positive thing. So there's a lot of people, well, not that many in the Salesforce world, but on LinkedIn that I wouldn't want to be aligned with, that I wouldn't care for my name and picture to show up in their space very often. And so I would say, who is it that can influence you? It could be somebody that you could learn from. It could be somebody that is at a company that you'd be interested in working for. It could be, I would say, definitely what you want to connect with people who have the job that you want next, that you get to kind of see what they say and what they do, and you can ask those questions and build those relationships. So thinking through that holistic, like who's going to help you, and you want it to be a two-way street, of course. So you want to, you know, have authentic relationships, but you do need to be deliberate for sure. Does that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
I would
And
just oh, go ahead, Chelyn.
Yeah, no, go for it.
I was just going to say, I would piggyback on that to say it helps to find commonalities that you have with someone that you can focus on, that will generate an interest in them to talk with you, gives you something to talk about. And that's kind of an opening that you can use to build that relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes it fun. I mean, honestly, in the world of, you know, in the past, it was very much an in-person network. Well, I couldn't meet the people that I know anywhere else but LinkedIn. So you can meet people all over the world who are just incredible and build relationships with people that you are inspired by, and that you want to. And once you curate your feed, you know, all day long, when I hop on LinkedIn, even if it's for 10 minutes, I'm like, you know, celebrations and, you know, cool jobs, and like, ooh, that's, you know, heartbreaking. How can I help? Or this person got laid off. Who can I connect them to? It's just, once you spend the time and really curate it and are purposeful, you will find it just more and more enriching.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, one of the things that you can do that helps your brand and really helps you get noticed, and it's something I really encourage all of you to do when you're checking people out, potential bosses, coworkers, companies, is take a look at their recommendations, both the recommendations that they receive, but also the recommendations that they give. So you have an opportunity to, let's say you want to, you're pivoting from the military into Salesforce, you want to be asking for recommendations from people that aligns with what you want to be known for. And so, like, if you were sending me it's like, hey, I'm working on my profile, I'm pivoting out of the military into Salesforce, I would really appreciate it if you could write a recommendation about this thing that we did. And I'm trying to convey to the community these 3 things about myself, or this one thing about this project, and just ask. I mean, the worst thing they can do is say no, or write you a recommendation that didn't look just like you wanted it. But if you help people with what you're trying to communicate, they often are going to write you recommendations that support it. So now when a hiring manager is checking you out, they're like, oh, interesting. Even though they don't have the experience, this person has 5 recommendations that show they're the type of person that I'm looking to hire. The other thing is giving recommendations. Give recommendations in a way that showcases you as the next role that you're going to be in. So let's say you're moving from individual contributor to you're going to be a leader. Instead of writing a recommendation about perhaps, you know, some success, this person is awesome, write it in a way that shows like, wow, this person's an incredible leader. Like, I can see them being a manager because of the way that they do recommendations. And it also, you see your picture. So you can write recommendations, go back through time and write some thoughtful, well-written recommendations for the people, leaders, teammates, and your picture and name and your words will show up all over LinkedIn. It really is a great thing from a branding perspective. So I want to go back to, oh, David, do you want to?
I guess I was on mute. My apologies. I was saying that developing or sending off those recommendations and asking for those is also a great way to develop relationships further. Before we continue, we had a couple hands raised that I wanted to call on some folks. So Karri first, and then we'll get to Alexis. Karri, you have the floor.
Hi.
Hi.
So you're talking about commenting on people's posts and everything, and I think you probably already know about the comment. I commented on your post forever ago, and it really was kind of a foundational point for me. And I just wanted to talk a tiny bit about the back end of that. So most of you know here that I'm a Talent Stacker member. So Bradley Rice had put out a comment in our group saying, hey, Chelyn put this out. Highly encourage you guys to go and post on it. So I did. And then you and I had just a fun interaction on there. And then that built into Eric Dreschfield kind of posting on there as well. And then he messaged me privately, and I was new to LinkedIn altogether. And so then I messaged David saying, this stranger like messaged me, I'm not too sure what to do. Is he legit? And so anyway, I'm just saying it was really full circle because it was a lot of really some of my main contacts and folks that have really helped me throughout this journey all in one little comment transaction. So it really does make a big difference, and it really can be foundational for just things going forward. So thank you very much, by the way.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a great example of where when you align with somebody, so, you know, everybody in the community, when you comment on, you know, David's posts, and like the network that he has is invested, right? So many of us look to how can we help? What can we do? Who can we introduce? And so you end up, when you invest in your network, you not only have that person, but you have all of their network. And it's really amazing to see the difference that makes. And I would say that's you know, when you see these things, I've applied to 80 jobs and it's a nightmare, versus I've been able to get these introductions, and it might be awkward and it's not easy, but it's so much easier when the person that you're talking to is already inclined to be helpful and interested in you and your success. And I'm glad you spoke up, because I was just about to talk about the Talent Stacker. So communities. So this is something that I also am seeing people do, and I want to speak from the perspective of my recruiting team and some of the customers. The Talent Stacker community has done an incredible job of branding up. So this is an example. So Lori's part of the Talent Stacker community, and that color across the top and the images and that banner is something that you can get through the Talent Stacker community. And this is a brilliant way for when you're in a place of building your network to be known. Same thing with the military, right? So that the office hours and all of that, being part of a community, making it really obvious that you are part of the community. So when I wanted to plug into the Talent Stacker community, and honestly at the time, I did that because I worked for Supermums, which is a competitor. I really just wanted to see what they were doing because it was pretty brilliant, really growing fast, lots of certifications and jobs. I'm like, what are they doing? So I just wanted to plug in. Well, when I did that, so I joined and then I added that logo. And because it was branded, anybody that I connected with, it was like, oh, sure, right? People aren't suspicious if you're sending connection requests when you're part of the crew. So I really encourage you to consider how do you, and that's why you see a lot of people doing the characters and all that, that you know, like, yes, this is Salesforce, and people are quick to say yes. But I would say as you develop your career, or if you're someone who is trying to pivot in more of that mid or higher level, I would not encourage you to stay branded as a community. You might pick a color or something that coordinates, but you want to be individual and show your skills, your expertise. You don't want to necessarily be perceived as kind of starting out if you're not looking for that level of job. So it's just something to consider, and I'll show you a couple of other examples. But I do think this is a great way as you're building the network, like make it really easy for people to know that you are safe when you send a connection request, that when you comment, again, all those comments, people are going to see your face and they're going to click through and see your profile. And you'll start to see more and more and more of that as you develop your network.
We've got a hand raised from Stephen. Stephen, do you
Yeah.
have a question or comment?
Yes, actually, Julius asked this question. It was a really good question. And this is about when you were talking about recommendations. If we have an old recommendation on our profile that doesn't necessarily align with what we're going for now, should we remove it?
It depends on if it's, so I would say generally no, because part of that longevity of over the years, you're somebody that people have thought highly of. If this person or that experience could also perhaps give different insight about you, and I did that in my case with one person. I went back and said, hey, I'm not doing sales, but could you speak to the Salesforce journey we went on? And so, but I would say no, unless it was so completely irrelevant, but yeah, I would just say, if it's like a politically challenging thing or a company that maybe doesn't align with what you want to do, but genuinely no, you want to have that consistency over time. And I would really encourage all of you. I'd even say every time you finish like a successful project, if you get a promotion, if you get a client who sends you a very complimentary email, is just to say, hey, I'm really trying to work on my LinkedIn brand, and would you mind? And so often people will do that. So when you look back and you see like, wow, this person has 20 recommendations over 10 years or, 5 years or whatever, 15 years, it doesn't tend to, you definitely notice what people are commenting on, but it's just over time. Like this person their bosses think highly, their teammates think highly, their teachers think highly, their coach think, that you see like this variety of people, and that speaks to who that person is and what they're like to work with. But I would, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, great question. And thanks for servicing that, Stephen. I missed it from Julius originally. Appreciate that.
It's no problem. Thank you.
That's but I would say, kind of thinking back, like when you look back through your history, I would encourage you to go back through your experience, and the title that you're given by your company isn't important, right? So it's what you did. So if there's a title that, maybe it just made sense for the internal purposes at your company, it's okay to shift it to a title that reflects what you did. Obviously you want to be authentic and honest about it, but you also want to look and think about, in that experience, a lot of people will be like, I was responsible for X, Y, or Z. But what they don't do is bring forward, what did you achieve? How did you have impact on your customers, your business? Who are you, right? So it's like, I don't really, it's great if you were responsible for something. If it isn't relevant for what I'm hiring for, I don't care a whole lot. But if I go through your experience and I'm like, dang, this person is like, he's on the team, he's a leader, they achieved their goals. Wow, they overcame some big obstacles. Like, those are qualities that matter to me. That your experience or your skill set might not as be important, but you want to go back and read it from the lens of your next opportunity. What are they looking for? What examples can you bring forward? And to keep those fresh and to keep things updated, that as you're doing things, captured in the moment, because you don't want to be doing that when you're interviewing, when suddenly you found yourself laid off and you're trying to go back through years.
Got a question from Iris now.
Yes.
Or comment. Over to you, Iris.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you, Chelyn, for being here. You are so easy to talk to, and like, you don't seem like a mother of twins at all. You know what I mean? The fact that you were working nights and raising twins during the pandemic, you look very, very calm and collected about doing it. I was just wondering, the thing about putting out our successes on LinkedIn, this community is really, really shy on social media. I find that I work with Hiring Our Heroes, and a lot of our new applicants don't even have a LinkedIn, and we're trying to coach them in doing that. So what kind of examples could you give me to maybe use to say, maybe you could put this on there as a success that you've done in a position, without them feeling like, okay, now I'm bragging, which none of us like. We just feel so incredibly uncomfortable doing it.
Yes. Well, I would say that for most people, if you're not uncomfortable about what you're putting on there, you're not saying enough about yourself. So I would say in general, just like, get that you're just not going to be comfortable, that both on LinkedIn and when you're interviewing and on your resume, this is a time to brag a bit. I would say that women in particular are really bad about, not everybody, and probably I don't have this as a fact, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I expect the military community is also this way, that talk a lot about the team. My team accomplished this, like we did this together, and thinking that that's a really good thing. And it is, but they're hiring you. Now, yes, they want to know you can be a team player, and they can see that by what else is on, the comments you make, the recommendations. But when you say, well, my team did this, in the back of their mind, it's like, well, was that the team success, or did this person that I'm considering hiring actually have that success? So I would say, this is a time to brag. I would also suggest that you ask the question, what do other people say about me? So one of the things that I did on my profile is I took a quote that was a recommendation from Bridget, and she talked about, I didn't want to call myself a women in tech champion, right? That sounds really weird, but she did. And so she put it in writing. And so I was able to kind of make it her quote. It wasn't about me. So I would say, what do other people say when you get your reviews? What have your, community officers said? What have your teachers said? What do your colleagues say? What also feels like it isn't special? I think many of our strengths, it just feels so normal to us. But somebody else who doesn't have that strength, they're like, I don't know how you do this. So what are the things you get compliments about often from? And it could be family, friends, colleagues. So those would be, I think, ways to lead into that conversation. But just to say, this truly is a time for you to brag. You need to put it in writing, because if you don't say it, it's not going to get said. Yeah.
If you don't blow your own trumpet, who will?
Yeah. Exactly.
You have to communicate your value 100%. We've got a hand raised from Alexis with a question or comment. Alexis, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I was just trying to get clarification on that. Sorry, my kids are in the background. I've had people, like, at my new position make comments about me that's just really supportive, and like in my own personal, like, Instagram or Facebook, I would actually take like a screenshot of that, and I would remove the person's name, and I would share that in my stories, and I would just be like, I'm so thankful, to be in an environment where I'm obviously valued. But I guess I'm not, maybe I missed the part when you mentioned about how to make that. If people aren't making that recommendation on my LinkedIn, is it not kind of awkward if I shared something like that and been like, oh, my coworker said this about, like, how do I do that without being completely weird about it, especially if they see it?
I think anyone who puts a recommendation on LinkedIn is doing that, understanding that it's very public, one of the things that I did at one point that was really helpful in the particular situation, I'd actually pulled the recommendations off of LinkedIn and put it in a second. It wasn't at a first interview, but it was later, and said, you don't know me. And of course I'm, interviewing for a sales job. So if I can't sell you on me being a candidate, you probably shouldn't hire me anyway. But here, I'm going to give you, here's 10 people and here's their titles and names. And this is what they have said about me over the last 8 years. So sometimes you could just use that as, and I wouldn't recommend that all the time, but it was in this situation, it was like, here's, these individuals that would be meaningful. So I would say you can ask permission. I mean, that's the other thing, is to just ask and say, I really would like to bring this forward. Do you mind if I use it? And, most of the time people are going to be happy to do that. And if they're not, then don't. But I think most of us don't ask enough. Like, we don't ask enough. We don't ask for, hey, can I have 15 minutes? I'd love to learn more about what you do in this role. I'm, really interested in your company. Do you have 5-10 minutes? I could ask you a question. If you ask so often, you're going to get, right? So that, and it is awkward and there's no getting around it. And I would say if we're comfortable, we're not doing enough and we're leaving opportunities in every direction, for sure.
Yeah, to your earlier point, Chelyn, the worst they can do is say no. So
yeah, and people do
no.
say no, right? Like they do, and it's not personal. It's like, don't worry about it.
Yeah. Annie has a hand raised with a question or comment. Annie, you have the floor.
I just wanted to comment on self-bragging, because it's not a bad thing. It can be, don't get me wrong, but it can be a good thing. Friday is an example for me. We were all working really hard on the project. 5 people were all looking for the same information and the same data, and 4 of them called me. And that's all I put. I put that. It made me feel really good. It was a big ego boost for myself. And I put, data queen for the day. And one of my colleagues commented, no, colleague for or data queen for life, So, I mean, it's a way of bragging. It was a big ego boost for me. It was a way of showing my colleagues that I really appreciated it as well. And so, but it got it out to the community that I do know data. Even though I'm in consulting and things like that. So, use your ego boost that you get, maybe not all the time, but, on rare occasions, it is helpful.
Absolutely. And be that person too. Like, if you do that about yourself, then be that person who posts about someone else. And I would say that's been a really effective way to build relationships. Is when I would see somebody get an award or a certification, often I would just make a post. And if you haven't used Canva, I really recommend just watch a couple YouTube videos, book a few minutes with me. You can make a post in 2 minutes. It's so easy and they are beautiful. So be that person that posts about, your boss, your colleague, your client, your, whatever it is. Even if you didn't get a job, this is one that's gotten tons of traction on LinkedIn, is to post something and just say, super disappointed I didn't get the job I interviewed for, but wow, if any of you are looking at, XYZ company, I had the best experience interviewing, and thank you, tag the HR person and the manager, and just speak their praises. And those tend to take off. And, no is often no right now or not yet. And when you get to be known as that person who's grateful and smart, and there's just so many opportunities, and Salesforce has a ridiculous number of jobs and opportunities. So it's just kind of getting into the flow. And once you're there, there's certainly tons of opportunities. So I'll show just one last thing, and that is, I wanted to kind of show the difference between, sometimes there's things that are really lots of Salesforce stuff. First, and this is not a Salesforce person, but I think that she did a really beautiful job with her image and that picture where it's just her face. She's smiling. She looks warm. She looks positive. There's nothing behind her. That green circle is actually going to show up. So anytime she's anywhere, like you can't help. And it's just really clean. So it's something to think about when you are branding yourself. So let me shut this off here. And I would say one last thing with branding. So as a recruiter, and this is true with hiring managers or, at companies or any recruiter, there is a system that's called LinkedIn Recruiter. And we can go in. I wish I had known this years ago. I just learned it in this job when I got trained on how it worked. And I don't use it during the day, but my team does all day long. They can put all kinds of attributes. So they're looking for keywords. And if, let's say I'm a hiring manager, I'm looking for someone who's really positive. We had a negative team member. It was really a drag. So it could be qualities. It could be skills. And we can put all these things that we want, we don't want, all kinds of attributes, and then it brings up this list. So what we've done with leaders that are at the customers that we work with, and they're higher level, which has been interesting. We've helped them redo their profiles and then showed them how we could get them to show up on the list. So it's the same thing with any of us, right? That when you are going for your next job, if your profile does not have the words, the skills, the experience on the job description that you want, you are not going to show up. So if you've networked and you build relationships, you often will still end up being recommended. You can find ways around it. But there's a huge number of jobs that you're never going to see posted because they're with recruiters. And if we can't find you and you haven't built a relationship and a brand and a network, like you're never going to know about them and we're never going to know about you. So that's where spending that time, and you didn't have to be, if it's, data, I love that example, right? Data queen. If your job didn't have anything to do with data in your title, then think about data. What stories could you do? Perhaps your job, you made decisions based on data that somebody else provided, right? Like how can you bring those words forward? You want them in your headlines, you want them in your about section. The skills area, you can move those around. You want to bring the top 3 skills up to the top so it's visible, and you want them to be relevant for your next job. That's the key, that you want to keep developing. And if there's a gap between what you have and what you want, go to work taking classes, add those into coursework, and that's, you can just be very disciplined around showing up, bringing your personality. There's a lot of, with Salesforce, right, that innovation is a huge thing. So if you read an article about a customer of what they've been able to accomplish because of Salesforce, bring that forward and hey, this was an incredible story on Salesforce Plus. Tag that person from the customer and the client and just say, I was really inspired what they were able to do with Salesforce. So you didn't have to write the content, right? All you're doing is using what Salesforce has, tag some people in it, give praise, share. A lot of equity and diversity is really important to Salesforce. If you look through the values, like high integrity, if you see a company that got an award for the most ethical company in the world, whatever, it's hey, I really appreciate, I want my dollars to go to companies that are committed to ethics and having good impact on the world. That's how you can get great content without having to write it, is just use what's out in the world, but make sure it lines up with how you want to be noted. And being the data queen, that's an incredible thing to be known as. And to find those ways of like, hey, this company used data to make this huge change, or look at the innovation that happened in this medical outcome because of data. It's like just finding those things.
Yeah, those are great tips for thinking about how to develop your content strategy and where to derive inspiration from. We've got time for just one more question, and then we'll wrap it up. And so, Stephen, I believe you had your hand raised. Over to you.
Yeah, so I just started. So I have a study group that I help people start, study Salesforce with Stephen, and I'm currently helping people study for Salesforce admin. And I just created a group on my page, and then I was curious on blasting it to all of my network because that's like spamming everybody. Should I do that or not?
You mean posting about it or sending messages about it?
Because when you create the group, it says, hey, share it with your network, and then you can like select it, and then send it to everybody. I was like, I don't know if I should do that or not.
Share away. Absolutely.
Okay.
It's like
Okay.
people, and don't take it personally. Sometimes it's like, hey, they didn't comment. Like, people get so much stuff, but absolutely. And I would say share it. There's nothing, people can just enjoy seeing what you're working on. You'll be shocked by, somebody will show up in your world, like you'll be the solution for them, or they're going to be like, wow, I need, Clicked or somebody like that. Like, hey, we need somebody that's a mentor, and many things can come from sharing and doing it in a gracious way. And I'd say for most of us, to the point of discomfort, that's a good place to be and to stay, like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well, I just was making sure. I was paranoid of, because a lot of times it feels like you're spamming everybody, and I didn't want to do that, but okay, definitely I will.
Yeah.
Thank
and
you.
If you're doing that every week, that's noxious. If you're doing it
Well, yeah, exactly.
a few times a year, that's like, people are excited. And then a lot of people, honestly, it's sometimes annoying, but like, many people just won't care. They won't even notice. They get so much stuff. But the right people are going to notice, and that's putting that energy out there, and really that intent and the work that you're doing to impact people is so great. And that's great for people to know about you, and somebody that's checking you out. Like, this is the type of person that's going to step up and do big things. If I hire this person and I need help with a project, they're going to be interested, and they're interested in people's success.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, great points. And I would just say, Stephen, when you put that message out, pay attention to the response. And I guarantee you'll get some responses. There'll be positive responses. And then think to yourself, these are all the responses that I wouldn't have gotten had I not put the message out. And view it from that lens, all the opportunities for yourself and for your group that you're creating through this message that wouldn't have existed had you not taken that chance. I do that, and I'm amazed at when I think I shouldn't post something and I post it anyway, what happens. So we've got time for one more comment. Karri, over to you.
When you get to the point when you are applying for jobs, I'm always hesitant, like with fraudulent activity, because I put my application out, and then I've seen some stuff come through that I'm like, what is that all about? So any pointers on red flags to look for?
Well, and I'd be really suspicious. Honestly, there's a lot of that happens. I would check out. So anyone that sends you something, you can go see their profile, right? So that, check it out. Some things that seem too good to be true do not give, and many of you are going to know this anyway, don't give your information. Nobody should be asking for your social security numbers, your driver's license numbers, any of that in any kind of communication that isn't secure. But mostly I would just say, check out the person. Go to their activity section. Like, you're going to see if this person doesn't have connections and activity, it's very unlikely that they're a legitimate hiring manager or recruiter.
Thank you.
Great question. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up now. Before we do close, a couple things I wanted to piggyback, or not really piggyback, but I wanted to highlight a couple things that Chelyn said that I wrote down that were impactful for me as kind of a way to summarize the session. And so at the beginning of the session, she mentioned that whether you exercise it or not, you have a brand. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's absolutely true. Regardless of whether or not you put any effort into it, that is your brand. So knowing that you have a brand, whether or not you choose to do anything about it, wouldn't you want to influence that brand? I would think the answer would be yes. So, Larry had posted in chat a while earlier. He said, it's hard to do that when you're an introvert. And I would say, yeah, Larry, it absolutely is. But that skill is a muscle. And if you don't work on it, it's never going to get stronger, and it will always be hard. The more you chip away at that, the more you get outside of your shell, the easier it becomes. I know, because I'm an introvert and I'm hosting sessions now with lots of folks. So it can be done, right? You just got to get after it. And I know you will. And the other thing she said was branding should be deliberate. Absolutely. Can't be accidental, right? 3 words to describe you was one of the slides that she put up, and talking about your branding statement. So when you think about how you want to brand yourself, what 3 words would you use, or what would you want people to say about you? Really impactful. When you're coming up with your branding goals, right? Think about why. Why are you branding? What are you doing now, and what are you doing next? Great tips. You want to maintain your brand by maintaining your LinkedIn profile. So if you have a bunch of old stuff in there, consider making space for new stuff and removing that. If it doesn't communicate value about what you're doing now, probably shouldn't be in there. And then one more thing, because there's so many gems tonight, is your activity section blank? If it is, people are looking at that. Why is it blank? So put some stuff in there. We talked about several ways that you can start generating content, easy ways to do it. And so, those options are available to you. Make sure that your activity section is not blank. I wanted to thank Chelyn for the past hour. It's been amazing gleaning all these great branding tips on LinkedIn from you. So thank you so much for spending the past hour with us and sharing your experiences and your expertise.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And thank you all for investing the time. It's just been a pleasure. And please do reach out, connect with me, tag me in a post, and do that uncomfortable post and tag me, and I'll comment and share. So I wish you guys all the best, and please consider me a resource.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And if you're studying for your admin exam, join Stephen's group. With that, we'll go ahead and close for the week. Everyone have a great rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you next week. Be safe.